Welcome, everyone, to Click Moments and Passionate Pursuits, The Unfolding, where intuitively guided conversations are followed with feral faith, enthusiasm, and joy, bringing new insights, inspiration, and perspectives along the way. And we're your hosts, Beth
and Bridget Burns.
And today we're going to riff on a quote that is important to both of us, but we also want to talk about quotes in general, because quotes have always been this fascinating thing to me. I think I recognize that there is profound wisdom in these simple, succinct sentences. And it feels to me like there is wisdom that is trying to be distilled down to us. It's almost like our ancestors or those before us know we have a short attention span. We can't hold on to longer concepts. But yet I think it's really interesting that this longer quote has really stuck with us. So this is actually a friend of mine, Rafaela, here in Asheville. She's an artist. There is a quote that she gave us by W.H. Murray from the Scottish Himalayan expedition, and this is what got us on this concept, or thinking about this. Here's the quote: "Until one is committed, there is hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans, that the moment one definitely commits oneself, then Providence moves too. All sorts of things occur to help one that would never otherwise have occurred. Whole stream of events issues from the decisions, raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidents and meetings and material assistance, which no man could have dreamt would have come his way." So that's the quote that we both have, that we both look at often, from what, maybe 3 months ago?
Or more. I think maybe it was more.
Maybe even more, yeah. And it's been coming up in different ways. It's something that we keep referring back to, and it's actually something that when I'm in a moment of hesitancy,
Mm.
I realize how important it is to move from that space, because I have to have a moment of commitment before any kind of movement will happen from the universe to support me.
Mm. Interesting.
Isn't that interesting? Like, that it's translating, like, I believe this. Like, there's something about these quotes that give us an opportunity to put it in front of us and say, do I believe this? Or am I in a space of, I don't believe it yet, and I'm just trying to understand it and grasp it, and I stick with it until then. But for me, when I read this, I was like, oh my gosh, this actually takes several concepts and makes sense of it, to where if I just understand, if I believe this, then I'm like, well, my job is not being hesitant. My job is to actually commit, because then all things can come to me to supply me for whatever this is that I'm wanting to do.
Mm-hmm.
How about for you? What comes up for you on this? Or, what stands out?
Yeah, I've got a lot going on right now in my brain, so I'm going to try to distill it a bit. So the first thing that I thought of when I was reading this was that this applies over and over and over and over and over again. Like, it's not just one decision and one act. It's like, I wrote down, I have to keep pushing the envelope, because as I push the envelope, then it opens wider, and then it opens wider, and then it opens wider. And every single one of those steps requires me to go back and make that decision again, even though I know that the decisions in the past that I've made, those firm, definite commitments, have worked in my favor. there's still something about every single time I make that decision or that commitment, I have to renew it. And then I renew it again. And I know that the old term that Murray uses here is providence. And what providence actually is the provision that your deity or your God provides.
Mm,
So it's almost like this image of the universe or God waiting for us to say what it is that we want so that everything can be provided for that effort. It's like, so I went rock climbing yesterday. Interestingly, we're talking about the Scottish Himalayan expedition, and I went rock climbing yesterday. And what it made me think of was there are at least 4 or 5 mapped out routes that you can take up these walls. Like people have gone and marked the routes and given them a number of difficulty and color coded them and everything for you. And you can either choose one of those routes or you can make up your own or, whatever. But every single step, every single reach, every single push is like a new decision. Like you kind of test out the hold to see if that's something like an angle or a
uh,
spot that's going to hold you. And then you go. And either you're held or you're not. And I feel like that this is an apt description of what this is like. It's like over and over and over and over and over again. And I just have to keep making that decision and commitment that I'm going to trust this and I'm going to go. And then after that, once I trust it, then it's out of my hands. Like,
I love this.
like
Yeah, no, I think that's a beautiful, I like what you're describing because literally you can get on that hold and be in motion up. And if you want to, you can get distracted and see that there's another hold and go back down and go to a different hold. But you can also just keep going on the path that you're on. It's up to you to lower down and go to a different hold, but it's also up to you to keep going on the path that you're on.
ooh, I'll tell you what. Oh
But a
man.
path is there.
Okay, that just reminded me. So this would happen to me when I was a younger climber and I was just starting. I've got a fear of heights. So if I dwell on it too much, I get stuck because like my legs shake and I get jelly. And with that going on, that does not allow for my muscles to function properly for me to get where I'm going. Two, I see this a lot with climbers where they will get to a certain point and they'll hang there. And when you're hanging like this, your forearms are burning, your fingers, like these tiny little muscles in your fingers start to burn. I mean, you are expending energy and using muscles that you are not used to using. But when you get stuck, and you can see it happen, when someone stops and they get stuck and they're in that position, you're like, oh God, like they're not going up. They're going to have to come down now. I actually saw a girl yesterday get stuck. She hadn't made it to the top. She was terrified. And she was also too scared. There are these auto belays. So you kind of fall back and it drops you until it catches and then it lowers you slowly. But she was terrified of that initial drop. So she actually got stuck. Her muscles were burning. She was shaking. And instead of letting it catch her, she climbed back down because she was so scared. I was like, if you had the energy to climb back down, you could have made it. Like it was all mental. It was totally a mental game. But this is what
Mm,
happens. People get stuck. And instead of riding the momentum, which is what I've learned to do now, my muscles are burning, my mind is moving. I know that I'm up really, really high, and I just keep going and I don't look down. I just set my course and I go. And I say to myself every single time I start a wall, I refuse to do anything but make it to the top. I know I'm going to make it to the top. I make it to the top of every wall I climb, period. And I did yesterday because I just believe that I'm going to do it and I don't give myself any other options.
yeah.
So I think that that really speaks to this quote, which is like, it says, there is an elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans, that the moment one definitely commits oneself, And that's the key.
Yes.
When you're uncommitted and you start out on a path, you are not going to make it because you haven't made the commitment to yourself that
Yeah.
you're going to make it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if you're at the bottom of that wall and you're like, well, I'm just gonna see how far I can go. I'm
Exactly.
just gonna do the best I can. These are all wonderful, encouraging things, but it's not intended for you to get to the top.
Right.
You're gonna get somewhere along that wall, and then um your fight, flight, freeze is gonna get activated. Your nervous system is gonna go. And this is what you saw. You saw this woman completely get activated. She's got stress hormones that are pouring through her body. So now she's in survival mode.
Yeah.
So her brain is like, I'm in survival mode. So now I can't go back because I will die if I go back.
Right.
Right. So I can't do that. If I go up, there's danger from getting too high.
Hmm.
So every single thought is now filtered through stress hormones instead of the the thought of definitively I'm making it to the top. It's a totally different lens. It's a lens, right? And so, but that's the once that you're definitely committed, that Providence moves too. And that's that the holds that you're going to need are going to be available to you because your mind isn't unactivated. Your mind is actually just focused on your goal. So you can actually see the very things. The way was there.
Yeah.
She had a path,
Yep.
but she couldn't see it because her mind was only seeing danger instead of the path,
And often,
right?
here's the thing, at this specific gym, and I don't know about a lot of others because I've only had experience with a few, but at this specific gym, the holds get easier to grip as you get towards stop because they know that you're going to be fatiguing. So there's these big holds with plenty of room to really get into them. And I mean, every single time I'm like, oh wow, these are really nice. These are easy. But people never even make it there to feel that. Like I was telling Eliana yesterday, I said, I just want you to get to the top of one wall and like hit that top so you know the feeling of this is what it's like in my body when I make it to the top and I can do that. So she did that a couple times on a couple of the smaller walls. I just wanted her to have that feeling. I'm like, I don't care if you make it to the top of the big ones, but I want your body to remember what it feels like when you get there.
How was it for her?
Oh, I mean, she was thrilled. And then she did it again and again, but on the shorter walls. But
That's
she,
great.
I mean, but her body will remember that.
Totally.
Eventually, she'll make it on the taller walls because she knows that she can do it and because she trusts her body and she remembers that feeling. But I
Well, and I
knew that
kind
she
of
wouldn't if she didn't have the experience, in some way.
well, it's sequential learning. I mean, I wouldn't want her just to be like, "Oh, that was so easy." Because it's not. Like it's actually something that like let's give it the let's honor that it is something that isn't something that everybody just goes and climbs up the wall. It is something that there are some skills to rock climbing where you have to sequentially get
Yeah.
stronger and better and higher and understand how to move your body in a way against the wall that you actually can get the angle and the leverage that you need to get up to the top, right? So because there's a little bit of striving to it, that's going to make her actually be more and more interested in it because it's challenging enough to keep you engaged, but yet, it's very satisfying,
Mm.
you know?
I think this speaks to when we want to make a bigger, more bold commitment, that perhaps one of the greatest gifts we can give ourselves is breaking it down so that we are still making definite commitments along the way and reaching them and then recommitting. And it becomes like tiered or stepped up instead of, well, this is the commitment and it's 25 miles away, but I'm going to make it anyway. That doesn't give like our brains that reward of, you made it 5 miles, you made it 10 miles.
Right.
And we're waiting the entire time to get there.
Well, and especially when it's like, we were talking about this before, like where it's like it's so conceptual. Like sometimes when something's tangible and we can actually
Mhm.
see where we are. So like on a track when you're running and you
Yes.
know that you're on the track and you've done the first, time around and you've done this, it's 4 times around the track to do the mile, right? So
Yep.
you know where you stand at all times. But some of the things that we embark upon, some of the hesitancy is the lack of being able to see our progress.
Mm,
And it kind of reminds me of you started talking about orientation. And for me, you're talking about orientation when it comes to attitude and beliefs going up the wall, right? And so we can apply that to anything that we're working on. What is our stance? What's our filter? What's our orientation as we step out? And then that's going to lead our reality. But there's also an orientation, and I can't remember if I've talked about it on here, but from a spiritual perspective, I used to believe when I was younger that I had a predestined path. And it didn't matter what I wanted to do. My job was to find the path that was meant for me.
mm,
Now, I still believe that we have certain skills that we can discover and cultivate that are more us. But I really do believe it's kind of based more on each individual experience from being a baby up and what we've seen in our family groups and our communities. And but we discover that, as opposed to, like, it's not necessarily predestined. It's like there's an orientation to me of I'm creating it. So it's almost like, instead of God has like a, I want you to do this, and if you don't do this, then you're not doing what I want you to do. I have more of an orientation now of God's like, what do you want to do? How do you want to do that? What are you pulling on from inside yourself? And then as soon as we make the decision, ooh, I want to try to climb up this wall. I want to do this. God's like, I've got you. Like every single thing in my body, my mind, my spirit will supply me on that path. Or if I decide that I want to go for I want to move across the country. It can be as little as this or as big as this. The universe is like, okay, let's do this. But it's waiting for me to make a decision. And then once I'm like, it's not like I think I want to move across the country. It's like, I'm going to move. And that orientation inside me shifts to, I'm doing this. As soon as I say I'm doing this, that's when it's like hovering. Like, I think we're doing this.
yeah.
I think we're
Yeah.
doing this. And then all of a sudden I'm like, I'm doing this. And the universe is like, go
Oh my gosh. Okay.
do it.
So we visited Emily Dickinson's homestead this past week, and something kept sticking out to you
Like 2 days.
about who she was as a person. Yeah, 2 days ago, who she was as a person and what she said about her orientation towards life. And
Mm,
you kept bringing this up. She says, I dwell in possibility. I dwell in possibility. And you're like, go ahead.
that bothered me. Because I was like, no wonder. So, those of you that don't know, Emily Dickinson never received any kind of notoriety for her poetry in her life.
Yeah.
So, she had thousands of poems and letters that she had sent people. She was a wordsmith. She loved words, but she never published any of her poetry. And so
It's
that
not with her
quote
name. Yeah.
with her name, yeah. And so that quote saying that, she always dwelt in possibility, I was like, yeah, if you always believe that anything's possible, then you always are in a lack of receiving or moving towards actually something. So everything is a possibility is a hesitancy orientation. There's a, I see it all, but there's always like this sitting back, and that's a possibility, that's a possibility, that's a possibility. So I'm not ever receiving any of it. That is an orientation of never. So when I heard that, I was like, no wonder in this lifetime she had never received any kind of like connect. Like, she wasn't a poet because everything was a possibility. Everything was something that could happen, but didn't.
And I think, just to offer a counter perspective here, I think that that's a beautiful place for her to dwell. I think that that was exactly where she was meant to be. I think that she was such an imaginative, creative, free spirit thinker that her world was more alive in her mind and in her imagination, and she didn't need it to be alive in the physical. I think that she literally dwelt in this beautiful, like rich garden of possibility. And that was her life. Like it was her life. It was totally individually hers. And I think that she didn't need or want to share it, because I think sometimes the danger of being like a genius and thinking differently is that people won't understand because they can't understand. And she didn't want to try to make people understand. She shared with very few people her poetry and her writing because they could understand, but she didn't want or need anyone else to, because that's just an extra effort. Like she didn't want to have to then all these critics come in and they have things to say and they're interpreting it. And like I was reading last night, people interpreting her poetry and the type of rhyme she used. And I'm like, she wasn't even thinking about that when she was writing. It was just flowing through her. She wasn't thinking, does this beat sound good? Like when you're a poet and a poem flows through you, and again, this is one of those concepts. It's like, how do you explain this unless you've experienced it personally? But there is a rhythm to the way that it flows through you. And so, yes, it will come out in, iambic tetrameter or whatever, but that's the way it feels in your body. Like there's this rhythm to it, like you're composing music or a dance, like it's within you. So I think that that was a beautiful place for her to dwell, and that she didn't need or want anything else. And that everything came out when it was supposed to, because now we're so inspired. Like she lives on.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
she
But
will
here's the
continue.
thing. But here's the thing.
Okay.
I think it's beautiful for her. I
Yeah.
think it's beautiful for her. I'm not sure it's beautiful for you or I to grab onto as an affirmation. So when I see it all over her place, and there's bookmarks and there's posters of that quote, I think it was perfect for her. She didn't need it. She was a woman who had privilege and money and means, and she could live that life, and she could draw away. And as Carla Carpenter, our amazing tour guide, said, that people would describe her as a recluse, but she wasn't miserable. She had the opportunity to say, you know what, I don't like being out more than I need to be. So she had the opportunity of coming downstairs into the parlor whenever she wanted to visit, but she didn't have to. But she was being who she was, and it worked for her. But once you put out quotes and people start grabbing onto them, I think for myself, I feel like I have this responsibility to make sure that it doesn't hold somebody back, that it's
Oh,
a
I mean,
fully
gosh,
empowering quote.
I
So
call
this
myself
quote,
an activator. So, I'm not dwelling in possibility by any means.
no, but my point is that when somebody says anything's possible and they believe that anything is possible, that's beautiful. But if you don't understand that that's just the beginning, that's the
Mhm,
quote that anchors you in the possibility of, I can dream a big dream. But
mhm.
then I need to release that one and stop saying that everything is possible. The moment that I have this clarity that and I commit myself to something, I have to let the possibilities go,
That's, I think, what
because otherwise it
terrified her.
holds me back.
Yes, I think that terrified her, because I'm absolutely certain she knew, once I commit to this, then, and I've said this a million times and I'll say it again, desir means to cut off. A decision literally It's like going to prune a tree and chopping off all the other branches. They're gone.
Yeah.
They're gone. So your energy can go into this path that you're taking. You've literally cut them off. And that's what you have to do to put your energy into the pursuit that you're on. And I think
So
that
if you love being in your room and you love being in your house and you love walking next door and you love writing poetry and you love reading books and you love taking care of flowers in the garden, if you decide to become a poet, you're probably going to let a lot of that go.
yeah.
You have to let that go to have an occupation, right?
Hmm.
And she already had an occupation. She was working around the house. She was helping to contribute to her entire family, their status of what they were in the community, and even to their reputation. I mean, she still, with how she interacted, was very progressive in her own way, and probably shifted many people's opinions and planted seeds just by who she was in that time frame. Like, you can't jump from who she was in the 1800s to who we now are as women. Like, that wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
You probably wouldn't even be writing as much poetry as you write had it not been for her, right?
Yeah.
Because of her um following her own passion.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you go back to some of this, like we were talking, we kind of got on from an illustration perspective talking about Emily Dickinson, but when you look at this quote, I think sometimes we don't recognize for me, when something isn't popping or happening, I wonder where the hesitancy is inside me,
Yes.
or the confusion, or if my energy is too in multiple directions that I don't have enough focus on it. So sometimes hesitancy is in the lack of kind of clarity right now with how much this thing is going to have, like how much am I going to spend my life doing this thing? Is it too arbitrary or ambiguous?
I've got a thought for like a really solid way to anchor this in. And it's really simplistic, but I think that sometimes we jump over the simplistic because we're trying to go for these big concepts. But just think about it this way. Like, if I'm sitting here today, none of my kids are home right now. I have a whole afternoon to myself. I mean, there's lots of possibilities, but if I sit in that and I think about all the possibilities, then nothing's going to happen. But I could say, all right, I know it's raining outside, so I don't want to go take a walk, but I know I want to go to the store and stock up the fridge before this week and the kids go back to school. So I am going to do that. So I've made a decision. Then I pick up my wallet and I pick up my keys and I lock the doors and I turn off the lights and I head out to the car and I get in the car. All of those little steps are committing to that decision. And now I'm off and I'm practically on autopilot. I know where I'm going. I, get my bags, I head in and I've done it. But that perfectly illustrates, like, it's a simple thing, but it perfectly illustrates we can use and apply that same process to larger concepts or larger goals that we want to achieve.
Right.
Like, we just bring them into the physical.
Let's
if
talk
if
about that.
I were, yeah, like, okay, so let's think of, can you think of an example of like something that someone wants to do, um and anchoring that into the physical with certain actions that they can take? Okay.
Like, you mean, like, why don't you pick something that you want to do?
um okay, I'm gonna pick something, just a rant. Okay, so say I want to open a used bookstore.
Hmm.
Right? Okay. I mean, totally grabbed that one out of thin air, but I'm looking at all my books, so I'm thinking about books. If I want to open a used bookstore, And I say, "Oh, man, that'd be so cool to have a used bookstore," and I can, like, picture I can even like, right now, I'm smelling the books, like, I know what they smell like, I know how much I would love talking about books with people all day, like, they'd come into the bookstore and I'd be like, "Ooh, recommendation time," so I can conceptualize this all day. But if all I do is conceptualize it, I've taken no concrete steps towards actually making that happen.
Mm,
So if I apply the logic of, okay, I want to go to the grocery store, I'm going to lock the doors, I'm going to pick up my keys, I'm going to grab my bags, like all those things. What would I do in this scenario that would make that, like, anchor that into the physical to start that decision, give that decision some momentum and start throwing that providence behind that decision?
mm, mhm.
I guess that's a rhetorical and an actual question.
I heard it as rhetorical. But the point is, like, we have to be able, and this is where I think practicing focus and practicing tools for follow through are integral. Like, I always ask myself when I struggle with something, when I say, like, whether it's like let's say you're struggling to follow up with physical activity, or you're struggling to eat better, or you're struggling to um, start your own business, like, because you get, you know, clouded by all the steps. Always coming back to, how much do I want this thing? Like, is it this or this? Because when it comes down to it, like with your used bookstore, the question is, what do I like about the used bookstore idea? When I say, oh, I'm not doing it, well, where's the hesitancy? So when there is hesitancy, sometimes the hesitancy is actually some part of us that either is confused, doesn't want to let go of something else that we currently have, and we think we'll have to let go of that, or doesn't know how, or is afraid. There's like reasons why we have hesitancy. So when
Right.
we dive into just with curiosity, like, why am I hesitant?
Hmm.
And we just bring out the thing, we name the thing, then it gives us power with our awareness
Yeah.
of, oh, well, what would I do to get past it? Marie Forleo talks about everything is figure outable. So everything is figure outable, then how do I get past this? I can get past something that I fear. I can get past something I'm confused about, because that just requires information. Every single time, it's like once you look at it, then you say, okay, well, maybe it's that you really don't want to own a used bookstore, but you want to work at a used bookstore. Maybe it's that you just like being around books all the time, and so you wanna figure out, like, how do I do that more? Maybe it's not a job, but it's a deep inner calling that you wanna take more time to read and spend time by yourself. Like, what is alluring about it? And sometimes we don't have enough, like, there's some part of us that's actually wise and is like, "Hang on, hang on, hang on, before you go running into that, ask yourself a couple of questions." So they're pre-verbal, non-attached to the truth that's inside you. So the hesitancy to me is always wise. Not
Hmm.
frustrated by hesitancy or judgmental. I'm always like, ooh, what's this got to show me? Because then I can be committed to truly something inside me, whatever it is, that's right for me. Because an emphatic yes, that's what I want to be on, or an emphatic no. Even if I come down to a no with something that I thought I wanted to do, I'm like, well, we can put that to bed.
Yeah.
It's not that.
Yeah. So that's the
Okay.
first step. That's the first step. Is it an
Yeah.
emphatic yes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And if it's not being frustrated, but like, wait, what more do I need to know?
Mm,
Sometimes it's, um, I need to get somebody else to help me with this. I don't know how to do this. I'm not an expert. If it takes 10,000 hours to be an expert at something, I ain't got time for that. All I need is to do a website. I just need to pay somebody to do the website.
mm,
Okay. Well, somebody said, oh, that's super easy. You can do it yourself. And you're like, oh, that's super easy. I can do it myself. That sometimes is a barrier for us
mhm,
because we think, oh, we should do it ourselves because it's super easy. Yeah, for you.
Right.
But if I don't know how to do a website and it's going to take me months, it's a waste of time.
Yep.
If I have $500, pay somebody to do it,
Yeah.
you know? So it's that, like, sometimes it rubs up against our, oh, well, there's something wrong with me that I don't know how to do a website. No, it's just your skill set. Who cares? Just pay somebody. Nothing wrong with you, you know?
So I feel like I want to bring this back to that rock climbing extended metaphor that I set out in the beginning, because it feels like, okay, I've made the commitment. I want to do this thing. But wait, before I take that step, I'm testing to see, is this an emphatic yes? Just like I'm testing those holes to see, is that like, oh yeah, I'm locked in. That feels good. Is it a maybe? Because if it's a maybe and you test that thing, you could slip and that hurts. And if it's a no, I'm not even going to put my hand on it. Like, forget about it. I'm
Yeah.
finding another path. But so I love that there's this layer before this quote starts. Until one is committed, there is hesitancy. Well, sure, because we're not going to commit to something until we know that that's an emphatic yes for us. So let's just start there, because we're not talking about, oh, you've got to commit. You can't just sit around and, well, maybe some people don't even know what they want to commit to. How do we decide what we want to commit to?
Trying it on,
Yes.
trying it on, getting closer to it, right? And that is like the middle part of this, because after you try it on, then it gives you information. It's like we've talked about this, you can't theoretically know what something is going to be like in actuality. Like, even like, and not to go down too much of a rabbit hole, but like, people all the time want like fame and fortune, but the reality is that most people actually don't want that. You
Mm-hmm.
know, they want the money without the fame, but yet they wanna be known, but they don't wanna have the fame because they don't wanna not be able to do what they wanna do, and there's some part of it that people realize that's a lot of effort, and that actually is gonna take away some things in my life that I actually love, my anonymity,
Mm-hmm.
my ability to just go out and go somewhere, and, like, some part of it people know is not for them, and I just wish that people would, once they realize I'm just actually gonna choose not to do this, and it's not because I'm lazy, and it's not because this and that, it's just I don't want that. That's okay. Let it go, right? But what I love about this is it says, once you make the decision, all sorts of things occur to help one that would never otherwise have occurred.
Yeah.
When we're thinking about it, we can't see the road because the road isn't visible to us because it's not our road yet. The moment that we decide that we're going to be in the car with our hands on the wheel, the road comes in front of us and we're like, "Oh my gosh, there's the road. Let's go." The universe will like supply us over and over. It's like the person who wasn't going to go to college, went to the admission office, decided that they were going to look into it, saw what it was going to take, and then the road rose to tell them what to do.
Mm.
The road was always there, but
Oh,
they had no idea what was on the road until they actually
okay.
went to the admission office and saw what was involved. And
Yep.
once they saw the road, it was like, "Oh, I can do that. I can drive this road."
Mm-hmm.
But you have to like check it out and get in the proximity of it. And once you do and you make a decision, then the universe is like, "Ooh, I've got you. I'm going to have this person call you about Pell Grants, and this person's going to give you advice about how to get the money here. And this person's going to be able to give you the extra books that they don't need anymore." And it's like all of this stuff. This person's going to say, "Hey, you're going to college? I want to go to college too. You want to do this together?"
Yeah.
Everything starts to align for you that would have never happened had you not said, "Hey, I'm going to college."
I do also want to add one final thing. I want to say this because I have been and continue to be the kind of person who gets scared by, okay, well, if I do this thing that is a yes for me. But if I do it and I get so far into it, and then I'm like, crap, I don't know that this was the right thing for me. Am I stuck? Am I like,
Mm,
cut all that other stuff off and I'm here now and I'm in college and it's my third year and I committed to this major, but I don't even know if I like this major. And oh my gosh, what am I going to do with this? And I've got all this time and money and energy invested. And I mean, I am a really multi-passionate person. So I'm always shifting and trying on new things. And I want people to hear that just because you commit and you get down this path does not mean that there aren't other options or that you're stuck.
yeah.
That's just not the case. Like the universe works in such a way that if you get down that path and you decide you want to shift and you make a new commitment, it's going to meet you right there.
Yeah.
Even if you feel like, well, that doesn't make sense. I don't know how that could work. Like I said at the beginning, you push the envelope and the envelope opens. You push it and it opens. You push it and it opens. And it just keeps meeting you there. And it just keeps supplying because the universe's supply is infinite.
Yeah. Yes, I think that's really important because I think sometimes we have a belief about what the outcome is going to be, and it's not always the outcome that we think. So, because we're on this path and we saw that it was going to be for a 4-year degree, then sometimes we can be like, well, very practical, and our brain starts going on like, well, that's what it's for. But maybe it was just supposed to get us started. And I've known people that have been 3 years in and literally went back to the 2-year mark because they had a lot of electives that would go on a new degree and they were interested in a new path and they shifted. But it was only through their internship and trying on this degree that they were like, wait a second, I don't want to do this. This is
Yeah, I
not
don't
what
know
I
why we
want to
don't stick
do.
internships before kids even go to college. I mean, I did.
Preach,
I did.
preach.
I did get
Yeah,
to intern somewhere at a communications office before I went to college, but not a lot of people do.
yeah. Well, and not only that, but let's just be honest. Like in social services, you could do one internship, but there's like 5,000 different jobs in this field that you can have. Maybe it just says not this job. It doesn't mean not to do it at all. So this is again, sometimes we have hesitancy because we have expectations that don't match our realities. But the reality is there's many different directions that we can go, and we have to trust that sometimes when something's meant to get us maybe in motion and get some momentum to it,
Mhm.
and then we shift, but we just keep constantly moving forward with everything as being information. And we do like what you don't want to do is continue to do something that you hate every day because you think that you should and you don't want to look a certain way when in actuality it's like, yeah, this is just meant to move you in a new direction. you know I had a pre-law degree. I was pre-law when I went to college, and in the first year and a half, I think it was after like 18 months, I switched it to social services. And I went into human services because I loved my abnormal psych classes. I took an elective and I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This is fascinating. And I switched, but I was a pre law major. And, I could have stuck with it. I knew it was going to be good money. But I was like, but my heart really is curious about this other direction. I want to go in this other direction. And I
Yeah.
did, you know?
This is why I got my English minor. This book and the professor who taught it. I mean,
Mm,
I took
mhm.
classes with him and I said, I have to take every single class you offer.
Yeah,
I don't care if that adds time or if I
right.
need to pick up a minor to justify it, but I have to be in your classes.
That's
And then I want
awesome.
to meet with you in your office on the weekends. Like, I can't get enough. Um, yeah. And and who knew that my journalism degree, my broadcast journalism degree I had, I thought it was going to be so I could be a news anchor. But I've used it. I use it almost every day. Totally
Mhm.
not the way I thought that I was going to. But that
Right.
doesn't matter because there was this higher path that all I needed to know, all the information I needed was here.
Mhm.
I didn't need to know all the ways I was going to use it. That was just part of the unfolding.
Mm, yeah. It's like if we can just keep it simple and see where the enjoyment is along the way.
Mm,
Like how like if something lights you up that you're learning, then that's something that you're supposed to know just for you, that you won't know how you're gonna use it.
yeah.
If it's a hobby, if it's something that supplies your relationship, if it is fulfilled in your work, honestly, it doesn't matter,
Yep.
but we make it matter because of our need to supply for ourselves, right? And all of that. Like it's a real thing. I mean, we're humans, right? So it's a real thing, but we can overemphasize it. And but the reality is if we can just start to anchor ourselves in some of these concepts and the ones that resonate with us to allow it to be like a guiding light in a certain season. And this gets to like the Emily Dickinson quote, like the possibilities one is a beautiful thing when somebody doesn't see possibilities. If they see walls and they don't see possibilities, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing to anchor into. But any of these can be something that we need for a season. And it's something that gets us to the next thing, right? Gets us to the next thing. So, but it's almost always showing us a way. It's showing like these quotes are something that we don't even realize how profound they are. But as a species, like some part of us knows this is really important. This is really profound. This is something that has the potential to really make a difference in our lives. Whether we understand the nuances and the minutia of why is not necessary. Although for us, it's completely necessary. I always need to understand it as much as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Can I share this last part of the quote that we didn't share? So at the end of Murray's statement, he then quotes Goethe and says, "Whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Begin it
Mm,
now."
I got goosebumps from that. Yeah, that's the thing. It's just to begin, but not with an expectation of knowing where it's going to take you. It could be that this road takes you down a road of not this, which then gets you closer to this,
Yes.
or it could be more of this, or it could be something else that you do not understand that you won't know until you walk down that path. But it's if it's a path that's got your attention, it's meant for you to explore.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you. Interesting conversation.
Great conversation. Special thanks to Asheville artist Melissa Moss for our cover art. You can learn more about her at melissamossart.com. And thank you to Cloud Cult for our intro and outro music from their song There's So Much Energy in Us. Find out more about them at cloudcult.com. And thank you, friends, for listening. Until next time, peace, love, and light.